There were 2 wine glasses in the dishwasher. We only drank together on Fridays. This was a Tuesday. The glasses weren't dirty, just rinsed. But I know Ellen. She never rinses anything unless she's trying to erase something. The thing is, I wouldn't have noticed at all if it weren't for the lemon slice. It was still in the drain catcher, flat and pale and pressed like it was hiding. I stood there staring at it like it could explain everything. It didn't. That night, she came downstairs wearing perfume. Not the usual kind she spritzes on autopilot. This was the good one, the small bottle she keeps in the back of the cabinet. I didn't say anything. I just watched her pull on her coat like it was armor. Then she said it. "You don't have to wait up for me." That was it. Not, "I love you." Not, "See you later." Just that. And I froze. Not because I didn't know what was happening, but because I did. I absolutely did. You don't say something like that unless you know exactly where you're going, and that whoever's left behind isn't invited. So I asked, "Where are you going?" She smiled with her mouth, but not her eyes. "I'm going on a date." Just like that. Like we were roommates. Like the last 11 years hadn't happened. I tried to say something clever. I wanted to sting her, to make her feel it. But all I could say was, "Is this our new thing now?" She paused, just for a second. That's when I knew it wasn't a one-time thing. Not a test. Not a fantasy. This was planned. "Try not to be too jealous," she said. And I swear to God, she said it with a smirk. Like she'd rehearsed it. Like this was a scene in her head, and I was playing the part of the man too weak to stop her. But I didn't give her the silence she wanted. I said, "I won't be here when you get back." She turned the doorknob, paused, looked over her shoulder. "That's dramatic." "So is cheating," I said. She didn't reply. She walked out the door and closed it gently, like she didn't want to wake a sleeping child. Only, the thing is, I wasn't asleep. I was just stupid. I didn't leave that night. Not really. I said I wouldn't be there when she got back, but I didn't know where to go. I sat in the car for 3 hours outside a closed Walgreens, just watching a moth slam itself against the inside of the windshield like it wanted out of my life, too. When I returned, the house was dark. I thought maybe she wasn't home yet, but the coat closet was open and hers was hanging neatly inside. Her heels were beside the door, lined up, spotless. There was no sign of a rush, no chaos, no lipstick-stained wine glass. She might as well have come back from yoga. But something was off. The air felt rearranged. I went upstairs. The bedroom door was slightly open. I pushed it gently. She was curled up under the covers, phone clutched to her chest like a child hiding candy. I stood there longer than I should have. Not angry, not even curious, just numb. I wanted to shake her awake, demand answers. But instead, I noticed something that broke me more than her words had. An orange thread. Just one. Caught in the bedsheet, near her pillow. I know every piece of clothing she owns. I've helped her fold every sweater, every pair of tights, every awful scarf her mother's given her for Christmas. She doesn't own anything orange. Mark does, though. I've never met him, but I've seen the messages. Yeah, I found them 3 weeks ago, buried in a hidden folder on her laptop, stupidly labeled temp files. At first I thought it was work-related. She's in marketing, always writing copy or mocking up mood boards. But no, these were screenshots. Screenshots of a messaging app one didn't even know she used. His name was always abbreviated to M, but he called her L. No one calls her L, not even her sister. That night, when she smirked and said she was going on a date, I already knew she wasn't lying. I just didn't expect her to say it so plainly. But now, standing there in the dark, staring at that single orange thread like it was a wire connected to a bomb, I realized something else. She hadn't just lied about where she was going. She'd brought him here. To our house. To our bed. I didn't need to rip the sheets off, or check the cameras, or sniff the pillows like some deranged detective. I just knew. In my bones. That thread was all the confirmation I needed. It might as well have been a confession written in blood. And the worst part? She looked peaceful. She looked like someone who had made a choice and no longer cared about the consequences. So I did what any self-respecting man would do. I grabbed my laptop and I started digging. Not just in her folders, but in the cloud backups she forgot I set up when her old phone died. I'm not a hacker. I'm not even particularly tech-savvy. But I know my wife's passwords better than I know my own. That's marriage, right? What I found over the next 2 hours made me sick. And it wasn't just about Mark. There were messages from a second guy. A third. Photos, too. Not explicit, she's smarter than that. But just intimate enough that I wanted to claw my eyes out. One was of her holding a coffee cup with J plus E drawn in the foam. Another showed her feet propped up on a hotel balcony railing. I checked the metadata. Taken last month. During the weekend, she said she was visiting her aunt in Vermont. The hotel was in Ohio. Ohio. Who cheats across state lines? I was shaking. Not from rage, but from embarrassment. I felt like a guest in my own life. Like I'd walked into someone else's story and didn't know the lines. And then I noticed the drafts folder. There were emails she'd written and never sent. One of them was addressed to me. Just my name in the to field. No subject. And inside, I don't think I love you anymore, but I can't tell if it's because you changed or because I did. That was it. Nothing else. No signature. No goodbye. Just that single, cruel sentence sitting in a digital graveyard of unsent confessions. I closed the laptop, and I realized something. This wasn't about jealousy anymore. It was about war. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of running water. It was early, barely 6. The sun wasn't even up yet, but Ellen was already in the kitchen, rinsing something in the sink. I didn't move right away. I just listened. The rhythm of the faucet, the sound of ceramic clinking, the faint hum she always made when she was pretending to be calm. It was her everything's fine soundtrack, and I'd heard it enough to know everything was not fine. When I finally walked in, she didn't look surprised. She just said, "Couldn't sleep?" Like it was a normal morning. There were 2 plates on the counter. One of them had been scraped clean. The other had crumbs shaped like someone else's breakfast. I stared at them, wondering if she'd set one out for me or for him. It's amazing how a few crumbs can feel like evidence. I made coffee and watched her wash her hands 3 times. Not like someone washing off food, but like someone washing off guilt. She noticed me watching and finally said, "Don't start." I hadn't said a word. Not one. But apparently silence has its own language, and mine was screaming. I told her I knew. About Mark. About the hotel in Ohio. About the emails. For a moment she froze, her hand hovering over the sink like she'd been caught in a photograph. Then she laughed. A single, humorless sound that hit me harder than if she'd screamed. "So you've been going through my stuff?" she said. I wanted to say you've been going through my life, but the words stuck in my throat. I told her I found what I was never meant to find. She turned off the water, dried her hands, and leaned against the counter like a lawyer preparing her defense. "I didn't mean for it to get this far," she said. "Mark was supposed to be temporary. A reminder that I still exist." I stared at her. "You don't stop existing just because someone loves you," I said quietly. "You stop existing when you start lying to them." For a second, I thought she'd cry. Her eyes flickered, softening. But instead, she whispered, "You don't know what it's like to feel invisible, Russell." That one hit me right in the chest. Because maybe she was right. Maybe I didn't know. But it didn't justify what she'd done. Nothing could. Then she dropped the real bomb. "Mark isn't the one I'm confused about anymore." She looked me dead in the eyes. "There's someone else. Someone I didn't plan on." I asked who. She didn't answer. She just reached for her phone, typed something quickly, and set it face down on the counter. A few seconds later, the screen lit up with a message preview. I didn't mean to look, but how could I not? It was a single line from an unsaved number. "Did you tell him yet?" My stomach twisted. She didn't even flinch. She just picked up the phone and walked out of the kitchen, leaving a small puddle of water on the floor where she'd been standing. I watched the drops glisten for a second before I noticed something else, something small but deliberate. There was a folded napkin near the sink, damp at the edges. I opened it, expecting nothing. But there were words written in smeared ink. 4 of them. "He doesn't know yet." That's when I realized I wasn't just part of her secret. I was standing in the middle of one. I didn't know who he was supposed to be anymore. Me? Mark? Someone new? The napkin wasn't a message she wrote to herself. It was a message someone left for her. And whoever it was had been inside my house. That was the moment I felt it. Not anger, not heartbreak, but something darker. A quiet awareness. I wasn't losing my wife anymore. I was being erased from her story piece by piece, and someone else was rewriting it from the inside. I didn't chase her upstairs. I didn't yell or demand the truth. I just stood there in my kitchen, staring at the napkin, the sink, the crumbs, every trace of her silence, and finally said out loud what I'd been too afraid to believe. "She's not done lying yet." I didn't go to work that day. I told my manager I had a migraine, which wasn't a lie, just not the full truth. My head was pounding, but it wasn't from lack of sleep or caffeine. It was the pressure. like I was holding in something that wanted out. I spent the morning walking through our house like it was a museum of a marriage that used to be alive. Every little object felt suspicious. The framed wedding photo on the hallway table, crooked, her keys on the hook, missing the pink one she used for her gym locker. The laundry basket, emptied, but one of her scarves had fallen behind it. Not orange. Not yet. But then there was the drawer, the one she kept locked in her art room. A little wooden cabinet that used to hold pastels and old sketchbooks, but over the past year, she'd started using it for personal stuff. That's what she called it. I never pushed. We were supposed to trust each other. But that morning, standing in the doorway of the room where she used to sit cross-legged on the floor and draw for hours, I noticed the drawer wasn't locked. It was cracked open just enough to whisper, "Look." I told myself not to. I said it out loud. "Don't do this, Russell." But my hands moved anyway. Inside, I found a leather-bound notebook. Expensive. Not the kind you buy on a whim. I opened it slowly, expecting poems or sketches or some half-started project she'd never finish. But instead, there were dates. Rows and rows of dates, each with a single word or name next to it. Some had hearts. Some were crossed out. Some were followed by times and places. Troy, 5 p.m./Willow Cafe. J. Car/your place. Marcus, hotel/repeat. My mouth went dry. This wasn't a diary. It was a log. A record. A scorecard. I flipped to the last page. No dates. Just a single sentence, written in all caps like a headline. "He'll find out when he has to." That was the moment something snapped in me, not with violence, but with clarity. This wasn't just infidelity. This wasn't someone getting caught in the whirlwind of new emotions or the cliché of a midlife crisis. It was intentional. She was building something, mapping it, managing it, and I had no idea what the endgame was. I put the journal back exactly where I found it, closed the drawer, left everything untouched. I didn't want her to know I'd seen it. Not yet. I needed to understand what she was trying to do, why she would let this unravel so precisely while still pretending to be lost. Around noon, she texted me, "Running errands. Want me to grab anything?" I stared at it for a long time. She had the gall to ask me if I wanted almond milk while plotting my emotional annihilation in a leather notebook. I typed, "No, we're good," and deleted it. Then typed, "Who's Jay?" and deleted that too. Finally, I sent nothing. I just turned my phone face down on the counter and sat in the quiet. But the quiet didn't last. About 30 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. No deliveries, no friends, no neighbors ever came unannounced. I hesitated before opening the door, and when I finally did, I was met by a stranger. Early 40s, dark beard, polite smile, and wearing a jacket with an orange scarf tucked under the collar. He looked surprised to see me. Not startled, just surprised, like he expected someone else to answer. Hey," he said. "Is Ellen home?" I stood there frozen, everything inside me clenching. "Who are you?" I asked, keeping my voice flat. He blinked. "Oh, sorry. I'm, Jasper. From the co-op." He gestured vaguely behind him, like that explained everything. "She asked me to drop something off. Just some documents." He held up a yellow folder with her handwriting on it. I didn't take it. "What kind of documents?" He hesitated, smiled again. "Nothing serious. Just a shared project." Then he added, "She said you wouldn't mind." Those 6 words landed like an axe. She said you wouldn't mind. He knew who I was. He knew. And worse, he clearly assumed I was in on it, or at least already written off. I finally took the folder. It was heavier than it looked. Jasper nodded and turned to leave without another word. No goodbye, no small talk. Just gone. I closed the door, locked it, and set the folder on the table. I didn't open it. Not yet. Because before I saw what was inside, I needed to decide something very carefully. Was I going to keep being a character in Ellen's story? Or was I finally going to rewrite the ending? I didn't open the folder for another hour. I just stared at it, sitting there on our kitchen table like a sealed confession. I watched the corners of the paper curl slightly from the humidity in the room, watched a fly land on it, and crawl aimlessly like even it couldn't make sense of what was inside. When I finally peeled it open, I expected to see, I don't know, receipts, contracts, maybe some messy scribbles that meant nothing to me. Instead, I found diagrams. Floor plans, actually. I recognized one immediately. It was our house. Hand-drawn, annotated, labeled in her handwriting. Every room mapped, every dimension exact. And on the bottom right corner, scrawled in red ink, "Russell doesn't go in here." It was pointing to the attic. We don't use our attic. It's unfinished, full of insulation and old boxes of college junk. It's barely even safe to stand in. But apparently Ellen had been up there. Recently. Often enough to note it. There were 4 more pages, each marked with a different date. August, October, November, and each one slightly more detailed than the last. She had drawn paths, arrows moving through rooms. Notes like 8 a.m., leaves for work, and garage, blind spot. My name appeared on every page, sometimes abbreviated as R, sometimes fully spelled out, always tracked. And then I saw the last page, one that didn't look like the others. It was a list, not typed, not organized, just scrawled out like she had to get it down before she forgot. Safe in attic corner, Russell doesn't know code. He's too trusting. Mark doesn't understand patience. Jasper equals backup only. Check camera access again, delete logs. Use Sunday night. He'll be distracted after game. If he asks, deny, deny, deny. Wait until papers are final. Then tell him. Papers? I read the line 3 times. Then flip the folder over, checking for more. Nothing. Just those notes. That was the moment the nausea kicked in. Not fear, not heartbreak, but the realization that this wasn't about love anymore. This wasn't an affair. It was a process, a removal, a methodical dismantling of my life while I was still inside it. And I had no idea what papers meant. Divorce? Legal filings? Something worse? I stood in the hallway, staring up at the attic door. The pull string dangled like bait. I hadn't opened it in at least a year. But I couldn't stop thinking about that note, safe in attic corner, and the fact that she was so sure I wouldn't go up there. It wasn't just a physical space anymore. It was psychological. She had built a part of this house specifically to hide from me. I grabbed a flashlight and pulled down the ladder. It creaked like it remembered every time it had been ignored. Dust hit my face as I climbed, and the heat in the attic made my skin crawl before I even reached the top. At first, it looked like I remembered it. Boxes, old lamps, broken chairs. But toward the far end, behind a stack of insulation panels, there was a tarp draped over something. I moved slowly, carefully, and when I pulled it back, I found a small locked chest. Black metal, combination lock, unlabeled, cold to the touch. I didn't try to break it open. Not yet. I just stared, because next to it, taped to the wooden beam, was a photo, a printout, of me, at my desk, working, unaware. I turned the photo over. On the back, Ellen had written, "He always misses this." I don't remember climbing back down. I don't remember putting the ladder away. I just remember standing in the living room, heart hammering, trying to calculate whether this was still a marriage or some kind of trap I hadn't seen being built around me. I knew 2 things by the end of that day. 1, my wife wasn't just cheating on me. She was managing me like a project. And 2, whatever was in that lockbox wasn't meant for me. But I was going to open it anyway. Because if someone draws a map to your grave, the least you can do is read it before they finish digging. The next 2 days blurred. I pretended everything was normal. Woke up, shaved, answered emails, made dinner. Ellen came and went like a fog that never really lifted. She was polite, so painfully polite, like we were neighbors sharing space, not lives. I'd never hated the sound of my own name until I heard her say it like a hotel clerk handing me the wrong key. But my mind was nowhere near the dinner table. It was in the attic, locked in that black metal box. Every second I sat in silence, I saw it in my head, heavy, mad, watching me back. I couldn't sleep. I barely blinked. I started writing down combinations in a notebook like a lunatic. Birthdays, anniversaries, random numbers she'd once mentioned and I never thought mattered. On Thursday night, I stayed up after Ellen went to bed. I waited until I heard her breathing shift, deep and even, and then crept up the attic ladder like a man slipping into someone else's secret. The lock had 4 dials. Numbers only. 10,000 possible combinations. I know. I Googled it. The box was cold again. Like it hated being touched. I tried birthdays first. Hers, mine, her sister's. Nothing. Then our wedding anniversary. The day we adopted our dog. The coordinates of our first apartment. Still nothing. I should have stopped. Should have walked away. But I couldn't. It was no longer about finding out what was inside. It was about proving I wasn't insane. I stared at the lock for a long time. Then I remembered something. Ellen once told me a story, years ago, when we were still us, about a library card she'd kept hidden in her high school journal. She said the code on the back became her lucky numbers because she used it to cheat on her math final. She laughed when she told me, said it was stupid. I hadn't thought about it in a decade. But somehow, my brain dragged it up from the deep. I opened my notebook. On a whim, I wrote the 4 digits she mentioned back then, 1738. Click. I nearly dropped the damn thing. The lock didn't pop dramatically, like in the movies. It just loosened. Soft. Subtle. Like the box wanted to be opened, but only by someone who remembered things that didn't matter anymore. I took a breath. Opened it. The first thing I saw was a stack of cash. Rolled tight, secured with a black hair tie. Probably a few $1,000s. Underneath it was a disposable phone, one of those cheap ones from a gas station. Turned off. Next to it, a key ring with 3 keys I didn't recognize. But under that was what mattered. A manila envelope. No name. No markings. Just thick paper, sealed with a single piece of red tape. I opened it, hands shaking. Inside were documents. Printed emails. Screenshots. Legal forms. And one page, a single stapled printout. That turned everything I thought I knew completely inside out. It was from a private investigator. The letterhead was faded, the name nearly scratched off. But the subject line was clear. Surveillance summary. Subject, Russell H. Client, E. H. Duration, 14 weeks. I didn't understand at first. I thought maybe it was about someone else watching me. But then I read the first paragraph. It was a summary of my daily schedule. What time I left the house. Where I went. Who I spoke to. What I bought. Times. Places. Receipts. Ellen had hired someone to follow me. I skimmed faster now. There were photos. Grainy, black and white. Me, walking into my office. Me, buying groceries. Me, talking to a woman outside the bank. A woman I didn't even know. The caption under the photo read, possible contact, same individual seen 2 prior weeks. I had no idea who she was. I barely remembered the interaction. But the report listed it like a strike. Like a sin. I kept reading. Another line. Subject does not appear aware of surveillance. Target exhibits minimal emotional range. Client concerned subject may be hiding depressive symptoms. Then, further down, client inquired whether subject has ever cheated. Evidence inconclusive, leaning toward no. I sat on the attic floor, the box open beside me, my entire identity unraveling. It wasn't that she didn't trust me. It wasn't that she loved someone else. It was worse. She believed something was wrong with me, and had paid someone to prove it. That was the moment the affair stopped being the point. Mark, Jasper, the hotel in Ohio, none of them mattered anymore. Because Ellen wasn't just betraying me physically. She was curating my life from a distance. Watching me like a character in a story she no longer understood. And the worst part? I think she believed she was doing the right thing. I put everything back in the box. Locked it. Covered it. Lowered the attic door. And went to bed without saying a word. She turned over when I got in. Pressed her head into my chest like she used to do back, when everything still felt sacred. I had a dream about us last night, she whispered. I closed my eyes. So did I? After I discovered the surveillance report, something in me split. Not like a snap, but like a slow, silent fault line crawling across a frozen lake. I didn't feel angry. Not exactly. What I felt was more clinical. I was beginning to see it all for what it was. Not a marriage, but a long, layered case study in how people wear masks for the ones they love. And Ellen? She was a master of costume changes. The next morning, I woke up before her. I made coffee. Sat in silence. I didn't look at her when she walked into the kitchen. I just said, I've been thinking we should go to Vermont next weekend. That cabin your aunt used to rent. She blinked. I could see the gears turning. That place. It's been years. I nodded. I thought maybe we could get some space. Fresh air. Just us. I watched her try to read me, her eyes narrowing just a bit. Then she smiled. Yeah, that sounds nice. It was the first time in weeks I'd seen her lie and know it. Because we both understood, there is no just us anymore. What she didn't know was that I had already booked the cabin, under my name only. I needed to test something. I needed to see if she'd try to go behind my back again. And I needed isolation to do it. But I wasn't going to wait for Vermont. I'd started making changes around the house. Small things at first, moving objects by an inch. Switching the drawer where we kept the Tupperware. changing the Bluetooth name on the TV to something random, Ghost Russell. She noticed. I saw it in the way she hesitated before reaching for things. Her brain was used to a system. She was built for order, control. And now, piece by piece, I was taking that away. She didn't say anything. Not at first. But one night, as we sat on the couch watching a show neither of us cared about, she asked, "Did you reorganize the medicine cabinet?" I shrugged. Must have just gotten messy. She stared at me too long. Later that week, I disconnected the home security app from her phone. She didn't notice. I erased the browser history, cleared cache, changed a few passwords. Again, nothing. That's when I realized something vital. She had stopped paying attention to me, not out of neglect, but out of confidence. She believed I was neutralized, contained. She thought she'd already won. That gave me all the room I needed. I started logging her behavior, just like she did with me. Times she left the house. Calls she stepped outside to answer. Laundry loads that didn't match the week. I checked the car's GPS history. She'd been to an address on Lansing Avenue 4 times in the past month. A neighborhood with short-term rentals and 0 street cameras. I checked satellite images. Nothing conclusive. But then I found it. A private listing on a vacation rental site. Booked by someone named E.H. using a masked email. She was renting it under her maiden name. And on the listing's public calendar, the next reservation was scheduled for Saturday afternoon. The same weekend we were supposedly going to Vermont. That was her play. But I wasn't going to stop her. I needed her to think I was still in the fog, still sleepwalking through the disaster she'd made. So I let her pack her bags that Friday night, humming to herself like someone who'd already buried the body. I let her kiss me on the cheek, tell me she'd meet me at the cabin because she had a quick meeting in the city before leaving. I nodded. See you there. I even smiled. Then I waited exactly 45 minutes after she left, grabbed my coat, and drove to Lansing Avenue. Parked half a block down. Walked under low branches and past flickering porch lights until I saw it, the rental unit. Lights on. Blinds half closed. A silhouette moving inside. I didn't go to the door. I didn't knock. I just watched. Like she'd done to me. I waited across the street in my car, engine off, fingers clenched around the steering wheel until another car pulled up. It wasn't Mark. It wasn't Jasper. It was someone I had never seen before. You know that feeling when your brain tries to rearrange reality to make sense of something it can't explain? That's what happened when the man got out of the car and Ellen greeted him at the door like a wife welcoming her husband home from war. He kissed her. She kissed him back. Like it wasn't new. Like it wasn't forbidden. Like it had been happening for years. And suddenly, I realized something terrifying. Mark wasn't the affair. Jasper wasn't the backup. They were decoys. Distractions. Names she said out loud to make me stop looking. This man, the one now taking off his coat inside her rented apartment, he was the real story, the one buried under all the chaos. I leaned back in my seat, heart pounding so loud I could feel it in my teeth. Not from heartbreak. That ship had sunk long ago. What I felt now was something colder, heavier, the kind of silence that sits on your chest and dares you to move. Because in that moment, I knew. My wife hadn't been cheating on me for months. She'd been living a second life, and I had just walked into the prologue of someone else's book, where I was never meant to read the first chapter. I sat across the street in my car for almost an hour, watching the windows of the rented apartment on Lansing Avenue. Every now and then, their shadows moved, 2 figures passing each other, merging, separating. It was strangely quiet. No shouting, no passion, just familiarity. And I realized then, with the weight of it landing all at once, this wasn't a fling. This was his home too. This wasn't her escaping with someone new. It was her returning to someone old. Someone she had hidden so thoroughly behind fake arguments, decoy affairs, and manipulations that I hadn't just missed the truth. I'd been kept blind on purpose. And yet, in that car, under the cracked ceiling of my own heartbreak, something strange happened. I smiled. Not bitterly, not with rage, but with relief. Because in that moment, everything made sense. All the paranoia, the surveillance, the mental traps she set, the emotional breadcrumbs, it had never been about guilt. It was about control. Ellen didn't just want to leave me. She wanted to make me believe it was my idea. And she failed. Because I saw everything. And now, I had a choice. I didn't knock on the door. I didn't expose her. I didn't make a scene. I just drove home. By the time she returned 2 days later, suitcase in hand, hair perfectly curled, ready to sell another version of the same lie. I had already changed the locks. There was a manila envelope waiting for her on the porch. Inside, copies of the surveillance report, screenshots of her hidden calendars, GPS logs, rental receipts, and a simple note I wrote in my own hand. No fight, no revenge. I'm done playing a part in your story. You're free to live whatever life you've been building. Just not in mine. R. She knocked once. Then again. I didn't answer. I watched from the upstairs window as she stood there, reading the note, eyes scanning faster and faster until she stopped pretending she was in control. Her lips parted. She almost knocked a third time. But then she turned and walked away. Just like that. The next few months were quieter than I expected. No dramatic confrontations. No drawn-out war over furniture or accounts. She tried to reach out twice. A text. I don't know what to say. I didn't respond. Then, 3 weeks later. You didn't deserve any of that. I hope someday you find peace. And that time, I answered. I already did. And I had. Because I moved. Out of the house. Out of the memory. Into a little place near the lake with creaky floorboards and a window that caught the sunrise just right. I planted a lemon tree in the yard. Took long walks without checking over my shoulder. I started painting, badly, but with joy. I got a dog, too. Not a rescue. Not a gift from anyone else. Just a dog that picked me when I wasn't even looking. His name's Oliver. And for the first time in years, I feel real again. Not watched. Not managed. Not dissected. Just me. And some nights, when I walk to the kitchen and see the moon through the window, I remember the way she used to say things like poetry. How she once whispered, "You don't have to wait up for me," with a smile that told me I was already gone. Now I whisper back, "I didn't." And I sleep like a man who finally knows how the story ends.